World powers huddle. The G7 summit focuses on threats including nuclear weapons and terrorism. Pope urges unity. The Holy Father encourages the healing of ethnic divides in Bosnia. Dynamic mix. We visit a field where athletes play out their faith. And not your usual shrine. An artist works on a unique grotto to Our Lady for the Pope's visit to Philadelphia. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, June 8th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. Sanctions against Russia, preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and terrorism in the Middle East top the G7 summit agenda. The world's most powerful industrial nations wrap up their meeting in Germany today. President Obama was there and was questioned about ISIS. Susanne LaFrankie is here with more tonight.
Yes, the Islamic State, Brian, did garner quite a bit of attention at the summit. The United States does not yet have a complete strategy for training Iraqi forces to fight ISIS. That's what President Obama said today at the G7. He said the Pentagon is reviewing plans to ramp up training, but he also said there must be a full commitment by the Iraqis themselves. The president admits his administration isn't sure how to best train Iraqi forces to defeat the Islamic State.
We don't yet have a complete strategy because it requires commitments on the part of the Iraqis as well.
Obama spoke to the press shortly after meeting privately with Iraqi Prime Minister al-Abadi. He was among the non-G7 leaders invited to attend the summit. The president says the Pentagon is still reviewing plans to boost training for Iraqi soldiers. He says the 3,000 Americans in Iraq training local forces sometimes outnumber recruits.
We want to get more Iraqi security forces trained, fresh, well-equipped, and focused. President Abadi wants the same thing.
The president has consistently pledged he will not send U.S. forces back into combat in Iraq. His critics say that's a mistake.
The administration is dragging its feet on moving special forces to the front lines, which is what needs to be done.
Middle Eastern terrorism expert James Phillips says more troops and air power are needed to defeat ISIS.
I understand for political reasons it's reluctant to do that, but things have to change or ISIS is going to be around for a long, long time.
Another concern is cybersecurity. The president for the first time weighed in on last week's massive hack into the computerized personnel files of 4 million U.S. government employees. Obama did not comment on who was behind the attack, but officials have said it appears to have originated in China. Ryan.
Susanne LaFrankie, thank you. Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. President Obama will speak this week to a group representing 1,800 Catholic healthcare facilities across the United States. Jason Calvi reports from outside the annual meeting of the Catholic Health Association. Jason?
Yes, Brian, the president will be speaking inside this hotel tomorrow on the future of healthcare and the Affordable Care Act. There's about 1,000 people right now meeting for the annual assembly of the Catholic Health Association. Their leader, Sister Carol Keehan, says she's pleased and delighted that the president will speak to them.
The president's address to the group comes as more than 100 lawsuits have been filed against the HHS mandate. That's part of Obamacare that forces most employers to offer health plans that cover contraception, sterilization, and abortion-inducing drugs. The CHA had opposed one version of the mandate, but the group now supports the so-called accommodation, saying it won't require them to pay for contraceptive coverage. However, our network, EWTN, the Little Sisters of the Poor, and others say the accommodation is morally unacceptable. The Catholic Health Association is celebrating its 100th anniversary. The meeting began with Mass yesterday at the National Shrine, celebrated by Cardinal Donald Wuerl.
Today, Chicago's Archbishop Blase Supich spoke to the group. He said Catholic health care is essential for the church's entire ministry. Now, EWTN News Nightly was not granted credentials to cover the assembly, but we will be bringing you the president's address tomorrow. Brian?
Thank you, Jason Calvi. And abortion is now on the decline across the U.S. The Associated Press survey shows states with aggressive life protection laws have seen abortion rates drop by more than 15% since 2010. However, states with unlimited access to abortion have seen similar drops. Nationwide, there's been a decrease of about 12%. A major factor, according to the survey, is a decline in teen pregnancies. We'll have more analysis of that survey tomorrow here on EWTN News Nightly. A former South Carolina police officer is now indicted in a fatal shooting. Video of the April 4th shooting was captured by a bystander. Michael Slager, who is white, is seen shooting 8 times at Michael Scott as he ran away unarmed. That shooting rekindled ongoing criticism of treatment of black suspects by white police officers. Slager is facing 30 years to life if he is convicted. Turkey's ruling Islamic-rooted party will likely need to form a coalition government. The Justice and Development Party fell 18 votes short of the requirement for governing without a coalition. So far, other parties in Turkey are resisting any pact. Once the lawmakers take the oath of office, they have 45 days to negotiate a new government. Pope Francis urges the people of Bosnia to put the deep wounds of their past behind them. He asks Muslims, Orthodox, and Catholics to work together for a peaceful future. Alan Holdren joining us from Rome with more on Saturday's papal trip.
Well, I tell you what, Brian, it was a really emotional day, not just for Pope Francis, but also for everybody who saw him. There were state leaders, there were interfaith leaders, and there were Catholics that met with him throughout the day. One of the most touching moments was in the cathedral there in Sarajevo, where he met with priests, religious, and seminarians. And you have to imagine that most of these people survived the Bosnian War from 1992 to 1995. 100,000 people, more than 100,000, were killed throughout Bosnia, 15,000 of whom died in Sarajevo. He heard testimonies from 3 particular people, 2 priests and a sister, who were tortured at the hands of authorities. They tried to make them deny their faith. One of them actually cried there in the presence of the Pope, and the Pope kissed his hands. It was really a beautiful moment. You could tell that it really meant a lot to them to have the Pope in their midst as well. He made a very clear statement at one point saying, "War, never again." And I think that's still resonating in the hearts and minds of people there in Sarajevo and in all of Bosnia today. Brian?
Alan Holdren in Rome. Thank you, Alan. And Pope Francis met Sunday at the Vatican with the president of Argentina for more than 90 minutes. President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner expressed the affection of the people of Argentina for the Holy Father. She brought gifts, including the portrait of Blessed Oscar Romero. Pope Francis gave the president a reproduction of an 11th century Russian icon of Our Lady. The search continues tonight for 2 convicted killers who broke out of New York State's most populated prison. Investigators are trying to determine if they had outside help with their elaborate scheme. Susie Pinto reports.
We're leaving no stone unturned. They could be literally anywhere.
2 convicted murderers escaping this maximum security prison for the first time in its 170-year history. It has hundreds of law enforcement officers scouring upstate New York today.
These are dangerous people.
The massive manhunt is on for 35-year-old David Sweat, who was sentenced to life with no parole for a 2002 killing of a sheriff's deputy, and 49-year-old Richard Matt, who is spending 25 to life for beating a man to death and dismembering him in 1997.
When you look at how it was done, it was extraordinary.
New York Governors Andrew Cuomo taking a tour of their elaborate and almost unbelievable escape route, discovered around 5:30 Saturday morning.
Must have kept you awake with all that cotton, huh?
After stuffing makeshift dummies in their beds so the guards thought they were sleeping, the inmates somehow obtained power tools to cut this hole in the back of their cell, cutting through solid steel. They exited onto a catwalk. From the catwalk, they had to shimmy down into a tunnel below. Once there, they had to break through a 24-inch brick wall, then cut through a 24-inch steel vertical pipe, which they then shimmied into, continuing for a significant distance until cutting another hole, making their way into the city sewer. Then when they reached a manhole, they had to cut through a steel lock and chain, finally disappearing into the neighborhood about a block from the prison. But not before leaving this racially offensive drawing for prison officials on a post-it reading, "Have a nice day."
It's clear that they had help. There's no way. Power tools don't just materialize inside prison cells. This has been being planned for a very long time.
Susie Pinto, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, a friend of the Boston Marathon bomber gets a light sentence for lying to the FBI. And a unique grotto devoted to Mary, undoer of knots, comes together in Philadelphia. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus giving us the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount from today's Gospel. Thanks for joining us on this 8th day of June, a Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. With Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev now on death row, another of his friends is sentenced. Robel Filipos will spend 3 years in prison for lying to the FBI. He received the lightest sentence of the 3 friends sentenced for impeding the investigation. The 2013 bombing killed 3 people and injured more than 260. We're connecting using Skype with Sister Helen Prejean from the Ministry Against the Death Penalty. Sister Helen, you had the opportunity to talk with Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, who is now on death row. He seemed to show no remorse at his trial. What was your personal experience visiting with him?
My experience of visiting with Dzhokhar was the same as being with other people who have committed terrible crimes, is that he's a human being with dignity. His emotions were very contained during trial, but I knew from personal experience of being with him, and I was allowed to testify about this, that he said, and you could see the pain in his voice, in his face, no one deserves to suffer like they did.
And certainly the argument that people have for the death penalty is that it's a deterrent to crime. What is your sense after your unique situation of being able to talk with so many people facing death penalty?
What comes through is their inherent dignity, and this, Brian, is what I, in dialogue with Pope John Paul, said, that do we just only uphold the dignity for innocent life when I'm walking with a man to execution and he's shackled hand and foot and he's completely defenseless, and he says, "Sister, please pray God holds up my legs." Where is the dignity in this death of killing a defenseless person, even though they did a terrible crime?
So St. John Paul making it very clear where he stands on this issue. This is then really a life issue, isn't it, Sister?
Very much so. And St. John Paul made that clear when he was in St. Louis after he changed the catechism on the teaching. And he said no to abortion, no to euthanasia, no to physician suicide, and no to the death penalty, which is cruel and unnecessary. Even those among us who have done a terrible crime have a dignity that must not be taken from them.
Why do you think it is then that so many people who say they're pro-life are also for the death penalty?
Because it's a distinction that we make of innocent life, to protect innocent life. We see dignity in that. But people who have done terrible crimes, we say they don't deserve dignity. Look what they did to their victims. They deserve to die, and we make a division. That's why St. John Paul's distinction, where he said, put the death penalty in with the other pro-life issues, so it means dignity not just for the innocent, but the guilty.
And we also believe in redemption and repentance, right?
Right. And think of it. Who are we as people? We don't give life to people, but we have decided that you have done a category of crime that is so terrible that we can end your life and you're going to go to God and into eternity. How do we know God's finished with that person? Who are we to make that God-like decision?
God must be the judge. Sister Helen Prejean, thank you so much for being with us on EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be with you.
And this weekend, we got a hint of direction from Pope Francis about the future of a reported apparition site. We have Michael O'Neill on Skype from Chicago, the creator of MiracleHunter.com. Michael, what did you take from the comments made by Pope Francis about Medjugorje?
Well, it's interesting because there are a couple of points. One is that the investigation is coming to an end, or the decision is imminent, as Pope Francis would say. He also said they've done a good job on the report. That, of course, doesn't mean one thing or another, except that he mentioned the word guidelines. Now, that's been translated differently as guidelines or directions or restrictions, but that means that there may not be a full judgment coming out. There might be just more guidelines on how Medjugorje should be dealt with.
All right, Michael O'Neill, MiracleHunter.com, joining us from Chicago. Michael, thanks so much.
Thanks, Brian.
And a Philadelphia artist is working on a new exhibit inspired by the devotion of Pope Francis to the Blessed Mother. The unique interactive grotto should be finished by the Holy Father's visit to the World Meeting of Families in September. Wyatt Goolsby reports.
In this unassuming part of South Philly, you'll find something a little out of the ordinary. Meg Saligman and her team are hard at work on a project for the Pope's visit to the city this fall.
We are going to build a grotto that is backlit So it is going to glow at night, and during the day it will catch natural sun.
Seligman is known for her community art like murals, but this is something completely new. It's an installation inspired by Mary, the undoer of knots, a Marian devotion in 18th century painting. The Holy Father has a personal devotion to her ever since he saw the painting in Germany as a student. The art piece will serve as a way of offering intentions to the Blessed Mother.
They're going around the city of Philadelphia with this art installation or collecting them online as well. From here, they'll take those knots and volunteers will untie them and weave them together sort of as a tapestry of human intentions. And there's really no limitation as to how big this can get. The only limitation, Meg says, is how many people send in their struggles.
The idea of the grotto started at Project Home, a nonprofit that helps the city's homeless. Sister Mary Skullion spearheaded the effort.
Mary Undoer of the Knots is really inspiring us to both do concrete acts to help those in need today, as well as to work for systemic change in our country.
Sister Mary says there's no better leader than Pope Francis, who values mercy and justice for the poor and marginalized. For Seligman, having a personal love for Mary makes this project special.
We want to inspire and delight people when they look at it, and we want a meaningful engagement when people interact with it.
In Philadelphia, Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. If you have struggles or a special intention that you want to share, you can submit it online. They'll be collected from all over the world and added to this beautiful grotto in Philadelphia. Go to mercyandjustice.org and look for Mary, Undoer of Knots. Up next, for the first time in more than 36 years, we have a Triple Crown winner. And sports and faith come together on the playing field. It's Monday, June 8th, and 1 year ago today, the presidents of Palestine and Israel joined Pope Francis in the Vatican Gardens to pray for peace. Thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Jared Meyer is fellow at Manhattan Institute for Policy Research. He co-authors Disinherited: How Washington is Betraying America's Young. You say policies are stacked against millennials. Is this because young people aren't as active in politics as they could be?
Well, I mean, we all know that older Americans take voting as a job, whereas young Americans tend to be more politically unaligned or unengaged. But I think it goes much further than that. It's that a lot of government policies tend to favor older, established interests, and they keep young people down or take away opportunity from them. So we really need to evaluate a wide array of government policies that is making success more difficult for millennials.
Let's break it down a little bit. Talk about Obamacare. How do you think the younger generation is shortchanged by Obamacare?
Well, if we look at the letter of the law, it says that older Americans can't pay more than 3 times what young Americans are paying. But before the law, it was about 1 in 5 was the ratio. So we're just increasing cost for young, healthy Americans so that they can keep, their parents' and grandparents' premiums down, even though they have more wealth, more assets, and have a job.
Yeah, because young people don't make nearly as much money.
Definitely not.
They struggle with raising children, getting going in their career, right?
Mm-hmm. If we look at right now, I mean, the new employment numbers that just came out, it's over 10% for the unemployment rate for people 20 to 24. That's over double the rate for people over 25. In the Obama recovery, young Americans have really been left behind.
And you almost have to go to college these days. So how is higher education kind of stacked against this generation too?
Well, it's that people, they view that they just have to go to college. It's something they have to check off a box in order to get to future success. But you don't have to go to a 4-year university, considering only about 40% of people graduate in 4 years. So a lot of people are being misled into going to a 4-year college when other options are available, such as community college, technical schools, vocational training. So not everyone has to go to college, and we need to kind of update the labor force to show this.
You call this a betrayal. How do you think it should be fixed?
Well, I think the way we need to fix it is start letting young Americans take the talents they have and apply them. Right now, there's over 1 million words such as can't or must or shall not in the Code of Federal Regulations. I mean, I can't even remember to grab my phone, keys, and wallet before I leave my house. How is a young entrepreneur supposed to keep track of 1 million commandments from Washington when they're trying to start or grow their business?
I was going to say there's a lot of shall nots in the 10 Commandments as well. So why do you think America's young people should be a priority?
Well, it's really a moral issue. When we're treating young people and taking opportunity away from them, first of all, it's un-American and it's not sustainable. If we want these programs such as Social Security and Medicare to be there for when, our parents or other young people retire, we're going to need to have major reforms that start restoring opportunity to millennials.
You want them to be there when you retire, too.
Yeah.
I know that's a long way down the pike. Disinherited, How Washington is Betraying America's Young is the book that is co-authored by Jared Meyer from the Manhattan Institute for Public Policy Research. Thanks for joining us, Jared.
Hey, thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. Well, after more than 36 years, the Triple Crown drought is finally over. American Pharoah made racing history, leading Saturday's Belmont Stakes all the way in front of a crowd of 90,000. He is the first horse in 37 years to sweep the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont Stakes. Jockey Victor Espinoza called it just an amazing thing, and the horse's trainer gives God credit.
God put him in my hands, and it's like he is just an incredible animal, and so I owe it all to him. I mean, this was American Pharoah.
American Pharoah is the first Triple Crown winner since Affirmed in 1978. Well, playing sports doesn't always require you to leave your faith on the sidelines. Catherine Szeltner takes us to a field where a traditional Irish game brings faith and sports together.
When the ball is in our half, it's too late for us to be thinking about where we're going to go then.
Just like their accents, the tradition of playing Gaelic football runs deep in Ireland. But the sport also makes its way outside the Emerald Isle, like at this weekend's Gaelic football tournament in Arlington, Virginia.
Many people describe Gaelic football as a blend of basketball, volleyball, and soccer.
And in between the kicks, tosses, and shots, players also bowed their heads.
Keep us safe from injury and harm through intercession of Our Lady, the mother of your Son, and our mother too. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. St. Patrick, the glorious apostle of Ireland, pray for us.
The president of Arlington's Ancient Order of Hibernians said a blessing for the players in between games. America's oldest Irish Catholic fraternal organization believes prayer and sports go together like cleats on grass.
It's a way to reaffirm your faith, I think, anyway, reaffirm your faith and make sure everybody's on the same playing field, literally and figuratively.
The president of the Virginia-based team, Michael Collins, didn't know a sport outside of Gaelic football existed while growing up in Ireland. Today, he's happy to see new players tackle the game.
Just to see the recruits coming in and to see them how they develop and to see them how they take ownership of the game and to see how they talk to their friends about it, it just blows my mind.
As the sport moves beyond Irish borders, faith's not a foul here. On the field, Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Great, thank you, Catherine. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Tonight, we leave you sharing a celebration of life. Thousands gathering on Corpus Christi Sunday to cross the Bridge for Life. The annual walk spans the Ohio River between Newport, Kentucky, and Cincinnati, Ohio. Now in its 10th year, it is bigger and better than ever.